Hey guys! Tonight we wander into a world where the sun is your sworn enemy. And the palest skin imaginable is your most prized possession. Picture yourself stepping out into a London morning in 1865, grey fog clings to the cobblestones. But every lady around you still flinches at even a hint of sunlight. You're wrapped, buttoned, gloved, and veiled like a fragile piece of porcelain. Terrified that one rogue ray might ruin months of careful protection. It sounds dramatic. But in the Victorian era, pale skin wasn't just beauty, it was identity, morality, and status rolled into one. You probably wouldn't survive this. Not with your SPF 50 and tinted moisturizer waiting at home, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments, let's see who's still awake with us tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stroll past rows of terraced houses and notice something strange. Every window, every balcony seems to have lace curtains drawn tight. Inside, women with translucent complexions sip tea and fan themselves, while gossiping about whose skin has turned after a trip to Brighton. To be tanned, even slightly, meant one thing: you'd been outside too long, doing something unseemly, something manual. Pale skin whispered of drawing rooms and poetry, sunburn shouted farmhand. You can almost hear the collective gasp of the polite world when someone arrives at a dinner party looking healthy. The Victorian obsession with pallor wasn't new. Of course, you can trace it all the way back to ancient Greece and Rome, where fair skin hinted at noble birth. But by the 19th century, industrialization gave that old idea new fuel. The city elite spent their lives indoors, managing estates or sketching watercolors, while the working class labored under open skies. Skin tone became a social shorthand. Your complexion told your life story before you ever opened your mouth. It didn't help that doctors and magazines chimed in, claiming pale skin meant purity of spirit. There were entire pamphlets insisting that a lady's complexion reflects the chastity of her soul. You can't help but smirk, if only sunscreen ads today came with that kind of moral weight. And yet, for these women, it was deadly serious. They went to astonishing lengths to keep the sun away. Imagine being told from birth that sunlight is your enemy. By age 5, you're trained to play indoors. By 10, you're wearing hats so wide you can't see your own feet. And by marriageable age, your mother measures your skin tone against fine porcelain to ensure you're still unspoiled. Historians still argue whether this obsession came purely from class anxiety or if it also reflected deeper fears of aging, disease, or the unstoppable forward march of the industrial age itself. The Victorians were obsessed with control, and nothing symbolized control better than unblemished skin. Even art got in on it. Portrait painters softened complexions, brushing away freckles and sunspots as if they were moral stains. In literature, heroines are described not just as fair but luminous, their paleness practically glowing. Think of Lucy Westenra in Dracula. Her white neck gleaming like moonlight, a beauty so fragile it borders on the supernatural. Pale skin wasn't just fashionable, it was ethereal, otherworldly. You weren't just avoiding a tan, you were aspiring to angelhood. The irony? Victorian cities were anything but angelic. Coal smoke hung so thick you could taste it. And pure white complexions were often achieved not by nature but by dust and soot that blocked out the sun entirely. You'd think that might make the whole sunlight paranoia irrelevant. But no, fashion and fear don't always listen to reason. The murkier the skies got, the more people dreamed of the perfect, clean pallor. And so you, standing in your corset and bustle, learn to move strategically. You time your errands before dawn or after dusk. You carry a parasol even in fog. You apply powders that sting your skin and lotions that smell faintly of vinegar and lead. Every mirror glance is a silent test, Am I still pale enough? And yes. It's exhausting. But it's also strangely comforting. In a world ruled by rules, pale skin is one rule you can control, of course. Not everyone agrees. In the countryside, farm girls laugh at the city ladies' ghostly appearance. They call them sheet ghosts, whispering that such women must be half dead already. One folklore scholar even recorded a rural saying, "Too white to be right." Historians still argue whether this was resentment, rebellion, or just country humor. But the divide between indoor beauty and outdoor labor never felt wider. You can almost imagine standing between those two worlds, your parasol in one hand, a pitchfork in the other, wondering which version of beauty feels truer. The Victorians would never admit it. But even then, a hint of pink on the cheeks was starting to look healthy. Scandalous, but healthy, still. You don't dare risk it. You've heard stories, women fainting after long carriage rides because a stray ray touched their neck. Or worse, being whispered about at the opera, her complexion's gone coarse. That's Victorian code for, she's been outdoors too often, so you clutch your parasol tighter, tuck your gloved hands under the shade, and move through the world like a delicate ghost, visible, admired, but never truly touched by sunlight. Pale skin, in this time, isn't just beauty, it's survival. Tomorrow, you'll learn to wield your parasol like a knight wields a sword. For shade is your shield, and the world outside is blazing with judgment. But for now, as your carriage clatters home under the gaslights, the streets are dim, the air is cool, and your reflection in the window glows faintly white. You've won today's battle with the sun. You wake the next morning to the pale gleam of dawn slipping through lace curtains. And for a moment you hesitate, how bright will it be today? You tilt your head toward the window, squinting at the light as though it's an adversary you must study before stepping into battle. In the Victorian world, sunlight isn't friendly, it's something to be outmaneuvered, managed, tamed. And your first line of defense? The parasol, both a fashion statement and a piece of battlefield equipment in the endless war for perfect pallor. You pick one up from the stand in the hall. Its handle smooth and cool beneath your glove. The silk canopy is embroidered with small violets, so delicate they look like real petals caught mid-bloom. When you step outside, the parasol unfurls with a crisp snap, and suddenly the world is filtered through a gentle, lavender-tinted shade. For a Victorian lady, this small circle of shadow isn't just practical, it's your social halo. The parasol parade, as the gossip columns call it, is a spectacle of engineering and elegance. At Hyde Park or the seaside promenade, parasols bloom like mechanical flowers, some of ivory lace, others trimmed in satin ribbons or fringe. There are parasols for morning errands, parasols for visiting friends, even special ones for mourning periods, their black silk gleaming dully under the clouded sky. To own many is a mark of taste and status. You can almost imagine Instagram today filled with captions like, #shaded and chic, #never tan. Of course, it's not all fluff and fashion. The best parasols come from skilled craftsmen, French and English makers who design clever hinge systems so the canopy can tilt to follow the sun's arc. Some are collapsible, small enough to hide inside a reticule until the light grows treacherous. A few even feature carved handles concealing secret perfume vials or tiny mirrors, because apparently, protecting your face from the sun also means you must constantly check that your hat feathers are still properly aligned. There's even a whole etiquette around how you hold it. Tilted too low, it looks flirtatious; held too high, it's unfashionable. The perfect angle says, I am modest, elegant, and possibly better bred than you. You stroll through the park, and the air ripples with parasol choreography, women gliding, twirling, adjusting, their shadows blooming and folding like clockwork. It's easy to laugh now, but parasols were serious business. A single tear in the silk could expose your precious skin. You wouldn't dare use a parasol past its prime, it would be like wearing last year's shoes to a ball. Some women even owned matching parasols for each gown. The colors coordinated down to the shade of ribbon. The sun was a threat. Yes. But avoiding it was also an art. Mainstream fashion magazines such as the Queen and Harper's Bazaar devoted pages to parasol trends. One popular style in the 1870s had ruffled edges meant to cast extra shade on the wearer's cheeks. Another had a reflective silver lining to bounce sunlight away. And because Victorians loved moral metaphors, the parasol often doubled as a symbol of female virtue, protective, pure, delicate. One preacher even warned that a woman who forgot her parasol was tempting fate and vanity alike. You can practically hear the sermon booming through the pews, "Thou shalt not Dan." Still, some parasols veered into the ridiculous. One fringe invention, literally fringed, was so heavily trimmed it blocked more view than sunlight. Another, from an 1880 patent, promised total UV exclusion using layered muslin. Though the inventor didn't yet know what UV rays were. Historians still argue whether that was genius marketing or just Victorian over-engineering at its finest. As you wander, you begin to notice the subtle hierarchy of shade. Aristocrats glide beneath pastel parasols lined with lace, while shopgirls make do with plainer cotton versions. A few daring souls use umbrellas, heavier, less graceful, but cheaper. And then there are the servants, walking a few paces behind their mistresses, faces bare to the light. Their Dans, like their wages, are simply part of life. You pause by the serpentine lake, watching sunlight shimmer across the water. A few boys splash nearby, laughing, bareheaded and brown-armed. A woman beside you clicks her tongue. Shocking. She whispers, "Their mothers will regret that complexion." You murmur agreement. But inside you wonder, what would it feel like to not care? To walk freely, unshaded, letting the warmth hit your cheeks without consequence. A soft breeze tugs at your parasol, and for a moment you feel the sun brush your gloved wrist. It's warm, almost pleasant. You pull back instinctively, as if caught in a forbidden act. That's how deep the conditioning runs. You've been taught that sunlight is not just dangerous but improper, an intrusion on your carefully curated self. In town, shopkeepers sell parasol cases of carved walnut or mother of pearl, perfect for storage when not in use. You see one in a window display, lined in velvet, engraved with tiny roses. The price tag makes you gulp. Protecting yourself from the sun, it seems, is as expensive as it is exhausting. Still, the parasol's prestige is irresistible. Even Queen Victoria herself was rarely seen without one. Though hers were said to be large enough to shade an entire small dog, everywhere you look, shade becomes spectacle. Carriages are designed with retractable canopies. Garden parties are timed for twilight. Gentlemen learn to carry their own umbrellas not for rain but to escort ladies safely between patches of shadow. You start to realize that sunlight shapes the rhythm of the entire society. Every movement, every glance upward, revolves around that golden enemy in the sky. One fringe tidbit that never made it into the etiquette books: parasols were also tools of flirtation. Tilted just right, they could conceal a secret smile or a stolen glance. Writers of the day joked that more romances began beneath parasols than beneath chandeliers. One playful guide even instructed, a lady may twirl her parasol to indicate interest, provided the motion is subtle. You grin, so the parasol wasn't just protection, it was performance. But not all parasols were meant for play. In colonies like India or Egypt, British women relied on sturdier sunshades made from oiled canvas or bamboo. There, sunlight was no joke, it was survival. Historians still argue whether the parasol's popularity overseas was born of genuine necessity or imperial display. But either way, it turned shade into a global export. Wherever the empire went, parasols followed, symbols of civilization and control in lands deemed too bright. By afternoon, The streets are a fluttering ballet of silk domes. You walk home under your little patch of portable night, feeling safely hidden from the burning sky. The air smells faintly of horsehair and perfume. Somewhere, a carriage rattles by, its passenger lowering her parasol with military precision as the sun slips behind a cloud, and you realize, for the Victorian woman, that fleeting shadow isn't just relief, it's victory. The Sunday may rule the heavens, but down here, elegance reigns supreme. One ruffled parasol at a time, you step into your dressing room, and before you can even take a full breath, the walls seem to close in with fabric. Everywhere, hanging from hooks, folded on chests, draped over screens, there are layers upon layers of garments waiting to be assembled like armor. This is what it takes to avoid the sun when you live in the Victorian age, not just a parasol, but an entire textile fortress. You start with the chemise, thin cotton clinging lightly to your skin. Over that goes the corset, stiff with whalebone, laced so tightly you swear you can feel your ribs negotiating peace terms. Then come the petticoats, plural, each one rustling and snapping as it settles. There's a faint scent of starch, lavender sachets, and something older, like dust and endurance. You're not dressed yet. Add the bustle, the crinoline, the bodice, and finally the long, high-necked gown. Sleeves down to the wrist. Every inch of you, save for your face, is sealed away. You glance in the mirror, and the person staring back looks elegant but also faintly trapped. Graceful suffocation. You mutter under your breath. That's what the Victorians perfected, to the outside world. This layering isn't about discomfort, it's about decorum. Pale skin must be preserved at any cost. And bare arms, ankles, or necklines risk not only sunburn but scandal. Society equates exposure with indecency. A woman who dares to show skin in daylight courts the same whispers as one who flirts too boldly. Historians still argue whether this obsession with modesty was about moral virtue or a deeper fear of female autonomy. Either way, the result is the same: you are swaddled, buttoned, and cinched until sunlight can't find you. Fashion magazines gush about the virtue of sleeves. They praise high collars lined with lace and cuffs tight enough to leave faint indentations on your wrists. Even gloves are non-negotiable. They protect your hands from freckles, tiny, traitorous dots that threaten your reputation. If your gloves are pale yellow kid leather, you're tasteful. If they're ivory silk, you're refined. If they're missing altogether, well, expect no dinner invitations for a while. And oh, the hats. Wide-brimmed, feathered, ribboned, each one a masterpiece of shade creation. You balance it carefully, adjusting the angle so your face stays in shadow even when you turn. Some ladies even stitch fine netting across the underside for extra protection. Though it mostly catches dust and the occasional insect, by now, you feel like a walking greenhouse. You can practically hear your skin sighing beneath the layers. But you also know that if you step outside uncovered, you'll feel naked. This isn't just clothing, it's confidence. The fabric is your barrier between yourself and the judgmental world. A friend once joked that Victorian women were like onions, beautiful, complex, and guaranteed to make someone cry if peeled incorrectly. You laugh remembering it, though the corset prevents you from laughing too hard. 3 jokes in, and you're already imagining the chaos of undressing. Still, these layers serve another purpose, fashioned cleverly. They let you control how much light actually touches you. Fine lawn sleeves diffuse sunlight. Muslin veils scatter it. And those endless skirts? They double as mobile shade for your ankles. There's strategy in every stitch. You can walk under noon sun and emerge as pale as moonlight, and yet, there's something else, an undercurrent of defiance. Some women begin experimenting with lighter fabrics, gauzy cottons, breathable linens. Dressmakers whisper about summer adaptations that promise relief while maintaining modesty. One designer even markets a gown with hidden vents disguised as embroidery. The critics are horrified. Of course. Too modern. They say. Too practical. You can almost hear the scandalized sighs echoing down Bond Street. Then there are the health reform enthusiasts, eccentric but intriguing. They argue that women's clothing is suffocating both physically and spiritually. A few radical souls adopt rational dress, cutting away the mountains of petticoats for shorter skirts and loose blouses. Naturally, they're ridiculed. Newspapers call them bloomer damazons. But secretly, you envy them. You imagine walking freely under the trees, feeling the air on your skin, not fainting from heat at the first hint of sunshine. Even doctors get involved. Some claim tight corsets cause sun stagnation, a phrase so absurd it almost deserves respect. Others insist the layers are necessary to prevent sun fevers. A vague, terrifying condition blamed on excessive brightness. Historians still argue whether these warnings were pseudoscience or clever ways to keep women compliant. Either way, the advice remains clear: stay covered, stay pale, stay proper. At garden parties, you notice how this code plays out. Ladies hover in shaded corners, parasols poised, gowns glowing white or pastel. No one dares sweat. You smile politely, though you can feel perspiration trickling between your shoulder blades. The irony isn't lost on you. Every woman here is faint from heat but proud of not showing it. Victorian resilience, it seems, means pretending to enjoy slow suffocation in 28 degrees Celsius weather. By evening, your layers cling damply, heavy with the day's humidity. Back indoors, your maid helps peel them off one by one. Each removal feels like a small liberation. Beneath it all, your skin is untouched, no redness, no freckles, just that coveted paleness. You run your hand over your arm and feel almost proud. You've survived the sun again. A quirky tidbit you've overheard: some women go as far as sleeping with gloves on to preserve their whiteness. They rub their hands with lemon juice before bed and wrap them in fine cloth. You try it once, but the smell keeps you awake. Still, you understand the impulse: whiteness equals worth. At least in this strange century, you sit by your vanity, brushing out your hair, feeling your body slowly cool. In the faint glow of candlelight, the day's effort feels both ridiculous and heroic. You laugh softly to yourself. It's not just fashion, it's endurance art. Outside, the last traces of sunlight fade behind London's chimneys. Tomorrow you'll wake and do it all again, layer upon layer, protection upon protection. A daily ritual of concealment masquerading as beauty. And as you drift towards sleep, corset marks still pressed on your ribs, you wonder, not for the first time, what it might be like to live in a world where skin tone means nothing at all. The next morning, you barely have time to admire your carefully powdered face before someone knocks at the door, an invitation to a garden luncheon. The words alone make your pulse quicken. Garden. That's code for direct sunlight, unpredictable glare, and 100 ways to ruin your complexion. Still, politeness wins. You accept, smiling graciously, while mentally calculating which of your bonnets offers the best coverage. Bonnet choice, after all, can make or break your reputation. You open the wardrobe, where 3 stand proudly on their pegs. The first, a wide-brimmed straw trimmed with blue ribbons, is your summer darling. Light enough to keep your head cool but too shallow to block a low sun. The second, made of stiff black silk, offers excellent shade but feels like a miniature furnace. The third is the crown jewel, an enormous, lace-draped confection that could double as a portable gazebo. You pick that one. Obviously, if you're going to wage war against the sun, you might as well do it in style. You secure it under your chin with a satin bow. The brim so broad you can't see the floor. Every step feels like a minor leap of faith. You joke to yourself, at least if I trip, I'll fall elegantly. The mirror reveals only half your face, your eyes shadowed, your skin glowing faintly beneath the veil. Perfect. You look both mysterious and well protected. The holy grail of Victorian beauty, Outside. The carriage awaits. You climb in gingerly, careful not to crush the bonnet's fragile structure. Your driver tips his hat. Suppressing a grin, men always laugh at women's sun prevention tactics. They think bonnets are frilly nonsense, never realizing they're carefully engineered devices of social defense. The ribbons, the veils, the tilt, all designed to preserve not just skin, but respectability. As you roll through London's winding streets, you notice the variety of headwear fluttering past like migrating birds. There are poke bonnets with their deep tunnel brims, practical for blocking light but utterly disastrous for conversation. Ladies in those resemble horses wearing blinkers. Then there are soft caps for indoor wear, often layered with lace veils when stepping outside. Each style whispers something about its wearer's priorities, vanity, virtue, or sheer defiance. Bonnet making itself is an art form. Milliners combine straw, velvet, feathers, and even exotic materials like horsehair or whalebone. The finest shops in Bond Street sell designs imported from Paris, delicate as pastries, priced like jewels. You once read about a duchess whose bonnet had an inner lining of polished ivory, meant to reflect light downward and illuminate the wearer's complexion. Historians still argue whether this was clever optics or complete nonsense. But it certainly sold well. And then there are the veils. Oh, the veils. Thin gauzes of silk or muslin, falling lightly across the face like whispers. Some are dotted with embroidery or tiny beads, which sparkle faintly in the sun, and defeat the purpose entirely. A few daring designs include tinted veils in pale lavender or green, meant to soften harsh sunlight. You've tried one once. It made the world look like a watercolor painting. Soft and slightly unreal. For a moment, you understood why people called them dream veils. At the luncheon, the garden is a dazzling battlefield of lace and fabric. Every lady's head blooms with some extravagant creation. Bonnet brims overlap like petals, creating islands of shade across the table. You sit carefully, mindful of your veil, sipping lemonade that tastes faintly of copper and cucumber. The air hums with gossip, laughter, and the occasional hum of bees drawn to the mountain of artificial flowers decorating everyone's hats. You can't help but smirk. Imagine explaining to someone in the future that all this effort is to avoid freckles. Still, it's effective. You watch sunlight fall harmlessly across the brim's edge, never touching your skin. The host compliments your porcelain glow. You thank her modestly, though part of you wonders if she means it or if she's hinting that you look one fainting spell away from the afterlife. Of course, not everyone approves of such extravagance. Critics call the fashion absurd, claiming veils are dangerous to health because they prevent the free circulation of air. Some even warn that tight bonnets can cause brain congestion. You roll your eyes. Victorians loved inventing new ailments almost as much as they loved tea. Still, one fringe physician proposes a compromise: translucent veils made from thin India silk, to guard against the rays while still admitting the breath of heaven. He writes, poetic, if impractical. A few progressive women rebel quietly. They shorten brims, loosen ribbons, and allow a sliver of sunlight to kiss their cheeks. Sunlight invigorates, they argue, quoting new health journals that praise fresh air and exercise. But these women are rare, often labeled eccentric. Historians still debate whether such small acts were early signs of feminism or simply fashion fatigue. Either way, every loosened ribbon feels revolutionary. After lunch, you and the others stroll through the garden. A swaying sea of fabric. The bonnets tilt, dip, and sway as if nodding to one another in silent understanding. We are united in shade. One woman's veil catches on a rose bush, tearing with a sound like whispered scandal. She laughs it off, but her smile wavers. Damage to a veil feels intimate, like a crack in one's dignity. You help untangle her, both of you pretending not to notice the faint red mark the sun leaves on her cheek. By the time you return home, the sun has lowered, the streets glowing bronze. You finally untie the bonnet's bow, feeling your scalp breathe for the first time all day. The relief is immediate. You hang it carefully on its peg. The silk still warm from sunlight it never let touch you, sitting at your vanity. You think of the thousands of women like you, each perfecting her balance between beauty and blindness, vanity and vigilance. The bonnet and veil aren't just fashion. They're shields in a world obsessed with appearances. And as you brush a wisp of hair from your temple, you realize, every woman here has built her own private shadow to live beneath. Tomorrow, you'll step into that shadow again, gracefully, obediently, and with just enough defiance to tilt your brim a little lower than etiquette allows. That night, you fall asleep with the faint scent of lavender still clinging to your gloves. When you wake, your cheeks feel dry, a little tight. The layers and veils might keep the sun off your skin, but they also rob it of air. And Victorian homes aren't exactly humidified sanctuaries. You cross to your dressing table, where an array of tiny bottles gleams in the morning light, milky, pastel, mysterious. This is your private apothecary, your daily gamble. Because if the sun doesn't get you, your beauty routine just might. You begin, as always, with cold cream. Thick, white, and faintly sour. It's made of almond oil, beeswax, and, unfortunately, lead carbonate. Everyone swears by it. It whitens, smooths, purifies. You dab it delicately across your face, ignoring the faint metallic taste in the air. Somewhere deep down, you suspect that purifying might not be the right word for something that makes your lips numb. But fashion has never cared much for logic. Mainstream beauty guides gush about such concoctions. The Art of the Toilette, 1866, claims a daily coat of lead cream gives the brightness of the lily and the freshness of morning dew. Another advises washing with vinegar diluted in rose water to blanch the skin of impure bones. You wince at the sting as you follow the ritual anyway. You've heard whispers of women losing their eyebrows or suffering mysterious tremors from too much lead cream, but those are always other women. Never anyone in your circle. And then there's the infamous arsenic wafer. You shudder, recalling the glossy advertisements, a safe and delicate method of producing a pure, lily-white complexion. Historians still argue whether these tablets actually contained deadly doses of arsenic or just trace amounts meant to invigorate the skin. Either way, it's not exactly the breakfast of champions. You once tried one on a dare. The headache that followed convinced you to stick with vinegar. There's a whole underground economy in these potions, imported powders from France, creams from Germany, soaps from India. Labels promise oriental fairness, pearl glow, and porcelain purity. You catch yourself studying your reflection critically, searching for signs of yellowing or uneven tone. The mirror doesn't lie, but it certainly mocks. You think of the irony, a civilization terrified of the sun, yet willingly smearing poison on its face in pursuit of perfection. Your maid, Alice, watches silently as you apply another layer of enamel. This one's a paste made of zinc oxide and egg white. It dries quickly, leaving a porcelain sheen that cracks if you smile too wide. You do anyway. A lady must not reveal her teeth unnecessarily, the etiquette manuals say. Perhaps they simply mean smiling breaks the illusion. A few wealthy women take it further. Rumor has it they use belladonna drops to enlarge their pupils, creating a dreamy look. You imagine blinking like a startled owl all day and can't decide if it's horrifying or hilarious. One of your acquaintances even dabs lemon juice on her freckles every morning, swearing the acid bleaches them away. You tried it once, and your face smelled like salad for 2 days. It's not all grotesque experimentation, though. Some remedies are surprisingly sensible. Cucumber masks, oatmeal rinses, and honey poultices circulate in ladies' magazines as gentle alternatives. You mix one now, mashing the cucumber with a silver spoon, enjoying the crisp, watery scent. For a few minutes, it feels soothing, a rare truce between vanity and sanity. Still, Every beauty ritual carries the same undertone: fear. Fear of aging, of imperfection, of sunlight's mark. You can almost feel it humming beneath each step of your routine. The lotions and powders are not about looking young, they're about staying untouched, suspended, as though time itself could be powdered away. Historians still debate whether this obsession was purely cosmetic or if it reflected a deeper anxiety about mortality in a world constantly reminded of death by disease and decay. Midday finds you visiting your friend Clara, who greets you with a face so pale she could pass for a ghost. "You must try this new preparation," she insists, producing a tiny jar of something shimmering. You open it carefully. The scent is sweet, too sweet. "Mercury," she whispers proudly. "Just a trace. It gives the skin a glow." You stare at her, half admiring, half terrified. Mercury. The same stuff used in thermometers. You imagine your reflection glowing faintly in the dark one night and decide you'll pass, but Clara looks radiant. At least for now. That's the trouble. These concoctions work. In their way. Lead whitens. Mercury polishes. Arsenic clears blemishes, right before it ruins your liver. Every jar promises a shortcut to beauty. And you can't quite resist the allure. Even doctors, yes, actual physicians, prescribe mixtures containing dangerous chemicals, claiming they stimulate blood purity. You wonder how many patients survived such stimulation. A light joke flits through your mind: if the sun doesn't burn you, the beauty cream will. You chuckle softly, though the humor sits bitter on your tongue. As evening falls, you remove the day's layers of enamel with rose water. Your skin beneath faintly pink. For all the danger, the result is undeniable: you look luminous, like a porcelain figurine come to life. And that, in this world, is worth any price. You think back to old remedies that predate even this age. Ancient Greeks used chalk powder. Romans applied crocodile dung mixed with vinegar. Yes, that was a thing. At least lead cream smells better, you suppose. It's a strange comfort, knowing you're part of a long, absurd lineage of humans terrified of their own biology. Outside, the gaslights flicker. You dab one last layer of powder on your nose, whispering the quiet mantra every Victorian woman knows: better pale than imperfect. Then you blow out the candle. Your skin still faintly shining in the dark, a moonlit ghost in your own boudoir. Tomorrow, there will be new powders, new promises, and maybe even a new poison disguised as progress. But for tonight, your complexion is flawless, your vanity satisfied, and your lungs, mercifully, still functioning. The next morning arrives hazy and warm, and you can already sense the coming battle. The light leaking through your lace curtains feels almost aggressive, too golden, too insistent. You've survived another night free of mercury fumes. But now comes the daily ordeal of staying pale beneath a blazing sky. Breakfast is quick: a slice of bread, a little tea, and a long sigh at the sight of the parasols by the door. You select your favorite, a delicate ivory silk model with carved bone ribs, a mother of pearl handle, and a discreet fringe of lace. It's light enough to carry all day but strong enough to deflect that ruthless Victorian sun. When you step outside, you angle it just so, tilted slightly forward, blocking the light from your face but leaving your vision clear enough to avoid stepping in horse droppings. The air smells faintly of soot and lavender water. This is your armor, your invisible shield. The parasol may look like a flirtatious accessory, but it's as strategic as any soldier's helmet. Mainstream fashion magazines of the day practically worship them. Godey's Lady's book declared that no lady of refinement ventures into daylight without her shade. And it's true: those who go uncovered risk more than just freckles, they risk social suspicion. Brown skin means you've been working, toiling, exposed. Pale means leisure, grace, control. As you stroll along the promenade, parasol twirling, you can't help but notice how every woman performs the same choreography. One hand holds the handle at precisely shoulder height, the other gathers skirts. Heads remain tilted demurely downward. The entire scene looks like a waltz without music. You smile faintly, realizing that in a way, you're all hiding together, participants in a grand game of elegant avoidance. But parasols aren't just props, they're technical marvels. The best are lined with dark green silk, which absorbs sunlight instead of reflecting it. Others have double canopies, one pale outer layer, one darker inner lining, to trap heat and block glare. Historians still argue whether this double-layer method actually made a difference or was simply another flourish of fashion. Either way, you adore the ritual, snapping it open, feeling the little puff of cool air beneath it, like a personal cloud that follows you around town. Of course, there are trends. A lady's parasol must match her gown. Today's ivory one pairs perfectly with your lavender walking dress, though you secretly envy the bold blue models you've seen in Parisian catalogues. Men, predictably, scoff at the sight of so many fabric mushrooms drifting through the streets. One columnist in the Times complained that the modern promenade has become a forest of parasols, and gentlemen must advance as though fencing. You imagine him poked in the eye and laugh softly into the humid morning. Still, you can't deny the parasol's power. You feel invisible beneath it, untouchable. A man might look at your face, but only through filtered light, never directly, never completely. There's something deliciously theatrical about that. The parasol lets you control the scene, deciding what's revealed and what remains mysterious. You pause at a bakery window, admiring the sugary towers of marzipan and sponge cake. Your reflection shimmers faintly in the glass, pale and perfect under the shaded canopy. For a brief moment, you think of women elsewhere, peasants in fields, sailors' wives on docks, faces tanned and freckled, eyes squinting against the sun. Their beauty isn't lesser, just different. But society doesn't reward difference. You look away, cheeks tightening under the memory of your lead cream ritual, and step back into your carefully filtered world. A horse-drawn omnibus rattles by, and you pull your parasol tighter. Dust swirls. The air is full of motion and noise. But under your silk dome, there's calm, a private hush. You begin to understand why women cling to these fragile devices even as trains and factories roar around them. In an age obsessed with progress, the parasol is stubbornly old-fashioned, a relic of gentler times. And perhaps that's why it endures. You pass a park where nursemaids push prams under the shade of chestnut trees. Every one of them holds a parasol, though theirs are plain cotton, not silk. The gesture is the same, though, the instinct to shield. Maybe it's not just vanity. Maybe it's survival, learned and passed down. After all, even the poorest women know to keep the sun at bay. Historians still debate whether parasols truly offered much protection or if their popularity stemmed more from symbolism. The silk might block some rays. Yes. But certainly not all. Yet, when every layer of society agrees that a lady's skin must not betray the sun, practicality becomes irrelevant. The parasol's real magic is psychological. It makes you feel safe, refined, above the chaos of the world. By midday, the heat grows oppressive. You retreat into a tea room, folding your parasol with a sharp flick. Tiny droplets of condensation cling to your wrist. The hostess greets you warmly, offering iced lemonade, a rare indulgence. You decline sugar. Too much sweetness is said to taint the complexion. Another superstition, but an easy one to obey. As you sip, a young woman at the next table leans over, admiring your parasol. "Where did you get it?" she asks. Her accent marks her as American, probably visiting London for the season. You tell her about the modiste on Bond Street who imported it from Paris. She gasps. "In New York, we just use umbrellas," she says with a laugh. You smile politely but cringe inside. Umbrellas are for rain. Parasol etiquette is a delicate thing. Confusing the two feels sacrilegious. When you leave, The afternoon sun has softened. You walk home slowly, parasol lowered now, watching the sky shift from white to gold. The whole city glows in sepia tones, like an old photograph developing in real time. The light hits the lace edge of your parasol, scattering tiny shadows across your gloved hands. You wiggle your fingers, amused by how even sunlight becomes decorative once filtered through fabric. As you turn down your street, you spot a little boy playing with a broken parasol, pretending it's a pirate's sail. You can't help laughing, perhaps the only honest use for one all day. You pass him by, the lace fringe brushing your sleeve, and think about how ridiculous yet tender it is. This endless effort to keep the sun out. You'll hang the parasol by the door again tonight, ready for another day's defense. And tomorrow, when you step into the light, you'll twirl it once for luck, your personal sun-proof charm in an age without sunscreen. By the next afternoon, the parasol alone feels inadequate. The sun has turned ruthless again, blazing down as if it holds a personal grudge. You can sense it pressing through even the finest silk canopy, testing your resolve. But today you have another layer of defense, one you've been secretly proud of mastering, the veil. It hangs delicately from your hat, gauzy and pale, like a whisper caught in midair. When you lower it, the world softens instantly, edges blurring just enough to make everything seem dreamlike. Streets look hazier, faces gentler, even the sky's glare turns milky and tame. You breathe through the fabric, smelling starch and faint lavender. It's as close as a Victorian lady gets to invisibility. Veils are nothing new. Of course, ancient Roman matrons wore them to signal modesty. Medieval women used them for piety. But in your time, the veil has evolved into a weapon of fashion and protection. Magazines call it the complexion's last defense. The more diaphanous the weave, the higher the price. Some are made of silk gauze, others of fine lace, even tulle imported from Brussels. You once read that Empress Eugenie herself never went riding without one, proof enough that the veil is both armor and advertisement. Historians still argue whether these veils actually shielded skin or simply trapped heat and dust. Some claim the fine mesh reflected sunlight. Others insist it did little more than make breathing difficult. Either way, you don't mind. The act of lowering it feels powerful, ceremonial. As though you're drawing a curtain between yourself and the world. Your veil today is a pale lilac, trimmed with delicate embroidery. When you glance at your reflection in a shop window, your face looks almost ghostly beneath it, blurred, remote, untouchable. It's oddly satisfying. The modern word might be aesthetic, but you'd call it serene, of course. Not everyone admires the fashion. A rather cranky columnist in Punch once mocked veiled women as specters haunting the daylight. You remember giggling at that, then immediately checking your mirror to make sure your veil wasn't crooked. Maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. You do look a bit spectral. But then again, better a graceful phantom than a sun-spotted mortal. The veil also serves another purpose. One you rarely admit aloud. It allows you to stare. With your face hidden, you can observe freely, a passing couple arguing in whispers, a gentleman tipping his hat to someone who pretends not to see him, a street vendor wiping sweat from his brow. No one meets your eyes directly, and that anonymity feels intoxicating. It's the Victorian version of sunglasses. As you stroll through Hyde Park, you pass a row of carriages where society women sit beneath vast hats and layers of lace, gossiping between sips of lemonade. Some veils are nearly opaque, black lace for morning, ivory for debutantes, soft pink for summer afternoons. You overhear one woman brag that hers was dipped in vinegar to repel the sun's poison. You're tempted to laugh, but remember your own vinegar experiments and decide perhaps she's not entirely mad. Then there's the curious superstition that veils filter bad air. Doctors in London, alarmed by industrial smog, once claimed veils might protect the lungs from soot and disease. Historians still debate that one too. Perhaps there's some truth to it. Given the city's fog tastes faintly of iron and coal, you tell yourself the veil keeps more than light away, it keeps the century itself at bay. A small breeze lifts the edge of your veil, brushing your cheek. The sensation is strangely intimate, like a hand tracing your jawline. You remember your mother's warning, never let the sun know your name. It was half joke, half command. She meant, of course, to stay fair, to stay proper. But standing here now, you wonder if she also meant to stay hidden, to move through life safely, unseen. A young boy runs past chasing a hoop, nearly tangling himself in your skirts. You lift your veil just long enough to laugh and scold him, your voice softer than you expected. The brief exposure of your face feels scandalous, exhilarating. Then the veil falls again, and you're back behind your gentle barrier. Practicality meets art in this ritual. 2. You've learned to match the veil's tint to your skin tone, ivory to enhance fairness, blue-gray to neutralize redness, pink to add warmth. There's a secret science to it, whispered among dressmakers and milliners, almost like sorcery. One friend swears by dabbing her veil with violet water before garden parties, it casts a flattering glow. She insists. You tried it once and smelled like perfume for days. Which wasn't the worst fate, but veils come with hazards. You've nearly tripped stepping onto carriages, your vision slightly blurred. Once, a curious bee flew under the gauze, sending you into an undignified dance that still haunts you. And then there's the inevitable heat, sticky, suffocating. But you endure it because beauty, as every Victorian lady knows, is a discipline. Still, you sometimes envy men. They stride bareheaded under the sun, faces tanned, unconcerned. No one accuses them of impropriety for having color in their cheeks. You mutter under your breath, if only freckles were fashionable. A passing lady shoots you a scandalized look, perhaps she heard. You smile beneath your veil, invisible and amused. By late afternoon, the park empties, and a fine haze settles over the city. You lift your veil briefly to let the breeze kiss your face. The sun, low and lazy now, glows through the fabric like honey through linen. For a moment, you wonder what it would feel like to walk barefaced, to let warmth soak in without guilt or fear. But habit wins, as it always does. You lower the veil again, cocooned in your gauzy twilight. When you return home, you hang the veil beside your parasol. A perfect pair of defenses. Your reflection in the hall mirror catches your eye, the faintest flush where the fabric rubbed against your skin. It looks almost like life trying to sneak through. You smile softly, tracing it with a gloved finger. Perhaps the sun hasn't given up on you entirely. Tomorrow, you'll choose a new veil, maybe cream this time, maybe dotted lace. The ritual will repeat, as it always does. For now, you exhale slowly, the day's heat slipping from your shoulders like silk, and let yourself rest behind the safety of shadow. You wake the next morning to the gentle clang of carriage wheels and the faint scent of coal smoke drifting through the curtains. The city never truly sleeps, it just hums more quietly at night. You stretch under the weight of your linen sheets and think about how your life has become a sort of choreography of concealment, parasols, gloves, veils, creams, every gesture, every layer, rehearsed and repeated until it feels natural. Almost. Today's ritual begins before breakfast. You pull on a fresh pair of gloves, soft kid leather, pale as milk, with tiny perforations along the fingers. They squeak faintly when you flex your hands, a sound both luxurious and suffocating. Gloves are more than accessories, they're declarations. Pale hands mean gentility. Tanned hands, labor. You remember reading in the Ladies' Gazette of Fashion that a lady's hand should resemble alabaster, not mahogany. You had to look up mahogany the first time, it sounded vaguely scandalous. The gloves extend almost to your elbows, disappearing under your sleeve cuffs. You've grown so used to them that your bare fingers feel almost indecent, like something that should be kept secret. Historians still argue whether Victorian glove culture was about class, modesty, or hygiene. But for you it's simpler, it's about proof. A gloved hand doesn't betray you. It hides your rage, your freckles, your calluses. You head out into the morning, parasol in one hand, gloves gleaming softly in the light. The air carries that strange mix of smells, horse manure, bread baking, and faint perfume from some unseen passerby. You walk carefully, avoiding puddles that could spot your skirt. Every few steps, you glance down at your gloves, admiring how they stay unblemished despite the dust and chaos around you. They're a small triumph, a quiet victory over the world's grime. At the market, you see women of all sorts, some bare-handed, some in sheep cotton mitts. The difference is stark. Their fingers are browned, nails chipped from washing and lifting. You feel a twinge of guilt and quickly smother it. This isn't arrogance, it's expectation. Society doesn't just prefer pale hands, it demands them. Pale means privilege, which means protection from the sun, which means protection from judgment. As you browse the fruit stall, the seller offers you a ripe peach. You hesitate, gloved fingers twitching. You can't possibly touch it without staining the leather. Oh, no. Thank you. You murmur politely. He shrugs, wipes his own hands on his apron, and bites into it himself. Juice running down his wrist. You envy him for exactly 3 seconds. Then you adjust your parasol and move on. You remember once hearing of a woman, Lady Beresford. You think, who ordered her coach windows tinted green so the sunlight wouldn't touch her hands while traveling. Another rumor claimed she slept in gloves filled with almond oil to keep her skin smooth. You've tried something similar, cotton gloves soaked in rose water overnight. It worked. Though your maid refused to look you in the eye the next morning. Probably unnerved by the sight of you sleeping like a wax mannequin. By late morning, the heat builds. You can feel sweat prickling beneath the gloves. Sticky and uncomfortable. You want to pull them off. Just for a moment. But you resist. Once you've worn gloves long enough, you start to fear your own hands. What if they've darkened? What if they've betrayed you? The thought is ridiculous. And yet it makes your stomach twist. You take refuge in a dressmaker's shop. The scent of starch and fabric dye filling the air. The seamstress, a practical woman with rolled-up sleeves, works barehanded. Her skin a warm gold from long hours near the window. You envy her confidence, the casual way she wipes sweat from her brow. Unconcerned about the mark it might leave. You ask her opinion on a new lace pattern. She glances up and smiles. Lovely, miss, she says, eyes flicking briefly to your gloved fingers. There's no judgment in her gaze, just mild amusement. You suspect she thinks you all look a bit silly. As she pins the hem of your skirt, she tells you a curious thing. My grandmother used to say the sun don't ruin a woman, miss. It only reminds her she's alive. You laugh softly, unsure how to answer. It sounds quaint, almost rebellious. You imagine your social circle's horror if such a sentiment made it into print. Being alive isn't exactly fashionable. Outside again. You flex your hands, listening to the faint creak of the gloves. The movement feels like breathing through cloth, restricted, delicate. You pass a newspaper boy calling out headlines about an upcoming scientific lecture, the dangers of overexposure to solar radiation. You smirk. Even science now agrees with your vanity. Historians still debate whether Victorians truly understood ultraviolet light or simply borrowed fear from their own metaphors. Either way, it's oddly comforting to know the sun really is dangerous. It makes all your rituals seem almost rational. By afternoon, the streets shimmer in heat. You catch sight of a few daring younger women with bare forearms, artists' models, perhaps, or foreigners. Their skin glows warm and alive, like living bronze. You feel the tiniest stab of curiosity. What does sunlight actually feel like against unprotected skin? You can't remember the last time you knew. Maybe childhood. Before all these rules sank in. When you finally reach home, the first thing you do is peel off your gloves. The cool air hits your hands. And the sensation is electric, almost shocking. You flex your fingers, tracing faint indentations from the seams. Your palms are pale, almost translucent. Veins show through like blue threads. You press them against your face, laughing quietly at how strange they feel. There's a bowl of water waiting on your vanity, scattered with rose petals. You dip your hands in, watching ripples distort your reflection. For a moment, you imagine letting the gloves go forever, stepping into sunlight barehanded, unmasked, unshielded. The image feels wild, indecent, thrilling. Then you pull them back on, snug and proper. Fantasy must always end before tea. You catch yourself thinking, not for the first time, that maybe the sun isn't the real enemy. Maybe it's the mirror. But that's a thought best left for another day. The morning air feels heavier today, weighted with moisture and faint thunder somewhere in the distance. Rain is coming. But you can't quite trust the clouds, they've tricked you before. You stand by the window, parasol in hand, gloves snug, veil ready, wondering whether to risk stepping outside. There's an unspoken rule in your world: even a single ray of sunlight can undo months of careful preservation. Still, there are errands to run, and a lady's schedule doesn't pause for the weather's indecision. You call for your carriage. The coachman nods politely, holding the door as you step inside. The curtains are drawn, naturally, to protect your skin from any wandering gleam. You always find the interior of a Victorian carriage oddly confessional, close, dark. A mobile cave lined with perfume and dust. As the wheels clatter over cobblestones, you find yourself thinking about shade. That precious commodity you've been chasing your whole life. Historians still argue whether Victorians' obsession with shade came purely from fashion or if it stemmed from genuine health fears. After all, medical journals of your time warn that too much sun agitates the humors and overstimulates the female constitution. You can't help but smirk at the phrasing. It sounds like the sun itself might cause moral decay. You picture some poor doctor solemnly diagnosing light exposure as the root of every feminine folly. Your destination is a friend's country estate, a weekend escape from London's grime. The journey takes hours, long enough for the skies to clear completely. When you finally arrive, sunlight has returned with vengeance, gilding the rolling fields like molten gold. Your friend, Lady Meredith, greets you on the steps, radiant in pale muslin and a straw hat wider than your parasol. You look like you've come armored for war, she teases. Glancing at your layers, you grin. Against the enemy above, you reply, tilting your parasol toward the sky. The joke lands. Though neither of you laugh too loudly, one must never mock the rituals too openly. Lady Meredith's garden is glorious, though designed less for flowers and more for shade. Birch and chestnut trees line every path, their canopies interlocking to form living tunnels of green. Walking beneath them feels like drifting through an underwater world. Light filters down in soft, trembling patterns. You take a deep breath, savoring the cool, damp air. This is what safety smells like. Every bench and gazebo is strategically placed in shadow. There are even woven awnings stretched across parts of the lawn, so guests can take tea outdoors without risking freckles. You can't help admiring the engineering of it all, a private landscape designed for women who fear the sun. Somewhere in the distance, servants are hanging thin muslin curtains along the veranda to diffuse the light even further. It's like a fortress built from fabric. As you and Lady Meredith stroll along the shaded paths, you discuss the latest scandal in the Queen's magazine. A young socialite caught riding barefaced through Hyde Park. She's ruined, Meredith whispers dramatically. They say her complexion darkened 3 shades. You both gasp softly, then exchange guilty smiles. It's absurd. Of course. But still. You understand. Reputation is as fragile as porcelain. And sunlight leaves cracks. When tea is served, it arrives under a canopy so elaborate it could pass for a tent. The servants bring chilled lemonade in crystal glasses. Beads of condensation sliding down the sides. You feel faintly rebellious and raise your veil to drink. The air feels good on your face. Almost indecently good. For a moment, you tilt your head toward the sunlight slanting through the canopy, letting it brush your cheek like a secret. It's warm. Gentle. Nothing like the monster everyone claims it is. Meredith notices. Careful. She warns playfully. You'll turn into a farmer's wife at this rate. You laugh. But a strange thought lingers, what if that wouldn't be so terrible? To work in the sun. To sweat. To stop worrying about being delicate, what would that freedom even feel like? Later, as you explore the estate's orchard, you see a few workers pruning branches. Sleeves rolled up. Faces bronzed and unbothered. They move easily. Without the constant awareness of being watched. You envy them, not their labor. But their indifference. Their skin tells a story of life lived in the open. Not hidden behind silk. You wonder if they ever notice how beautiful their tans look in the late afternoon light. The scent of apples fills the air, sweet. Dusty. Ripe. You reach up. Impulsively. To pluck one from a low branch. For a second. You forget your gloves and feel the smooth, cool skin of the fruit against your palm. It's shocking how alive that touch feels. A tiny sting of guilt follows. Propriety demands barriers between you and the world. But oh, how pleasant it is to break them sometimes. Historians still debate whether the Victorian sun fear was entirely class-based or partly psychological. Some claim it symbolized a deeper cultural anxiety, a terror of nature itself. Untamed and uncontrollable. You can see their point. Every ritual of your daily life seems designed to keep the natural world at arm's length. Gloves against dirt. Veils against wind. Parasols against light. Civilization. Distilled into fabric. By late afternoon, thunder rolls faintly across the horizon. Dark clouds gather, promising rain. You and Meredith retreat to the veranda as the first drops begin to fall. Soft and musical on the awnings. The relief is instant, no more glare. No more fear. You both sigh. Content. Perhaps we should have thanked the sun instead of hiding from it. You murmur. Meredith arches an eyebrow. Don't start sounding like a poet. She warns. They're always the first to catch a chill. You laugh. And the sound feels freer than usual. Rolling out into the grey air. The rain cools the earth. And for once, you don't reach for your veil or parasol. The day ends with you leaning back in your chair, watching droplets gather on the leaves. Gloved hands folded neatly in your lap. The storm, in its gentle violence, feels almost purifying. For a brief, fleeting moment, you let yourself believe that maybe the sky isn't your enemy after all. By morning, the rain has passed, leaving the world washed and glistening. The air smells of wet grass, coal smoke, and something faintly metallic, ozone. Perhaps. You stand on the veranda of Lady Meredith's estate, sipping tea and watching a single shaft of sunlight pierce the clouds. It lights the damp garden like a spotlight, glittering across puddles and droplets still clinging to the leaves. You feel the warmth even from here. A ghostly touch through the mist. It's tempting, for a moment, to step into it, barefaced, unguarded. But habit wins again, as it always does. You pull the lace curtains tighter, shielding your place at the breakfast table. The talk over tea is full of gossip. As usual, fashion, travel, scandal. But one story catches your attention. A woman in Brighton rumored to have invented a sun lotion. You set your cup down carefully. A lotion? You echo. Meredith smirks. Yes. Something to rub on your face to block the light. Some chemical concoction, probably smells dreadful. Historians still argue whether this Brighton invention was a myth or the faint beginnings of what would one day become sunscreen. Either way, it fascinates you. A cream that doesn't whiten or poison, but protects. Imagine that, a future where women can face the sun without consequence. The thought feels both absurd and revolutionary. You picture some mad chemist stirring zinc and oil together while the rest of the world laughs at him. After breakfast, you wander into the library. The air is cool, scented with old paper and dust. You find an old travel diary on the shelf. Its pages yellowed and brittle. It belonged to a lady who visited India 20 years earlier. Her writing is brisk, precise, occasionally smug. The natives, she writes, are remarkably unbothered by the sun. Their complexions darken but show no harm. You frown. There's envy hidden between her lines. You can feel it, the ache of someone trapped in lace, staring at people who live free under open skies. You close the diary gently and glance out the window. The clouds have thinned. Servants are setting up for the afternoon garden party, hoisting awnings and adjusting parasols. You sigh. Even here, in the countryside, the performance continues. You've learned to play your part well. There's comfort in rules, after all. But lately, you've begun to notice small cracks forming in the porcelain mask of society. Younger women are whispering about health and fresh air. A few daring voices even claim that pale skin looks sickly, that a touch of color is becoming. These ideas drift in from the continent, carried by artists, reformers, and the occasional scandalous widow who dares to swim in public. You're not sure whether to laugh or listen. As the guests arrive, you find your place beneath a large striped awning. Conversation hums softly, gentlemen discussing railway shares, ladies admiring each other's parasols. You lean in as one of them. A lively woman named Mrs. Harcourt describes her recent trip to Italy. "The light there," she exclaims. "It's divine. I tried so hard to stay covered. But I confess, one afternoon, I let the sun touch my face." She pauses for dramatic effect. "And you know what? I didn't melt." Laughter ripples through the group. Half amused, half scandalized. You laugh too. But something in you stirs. Not envy this time, but recognition. You imagine her standing under that southern sun, free of veils, feeling warmth without fear. It sounds blissful. Historians still debate when exactly the tide began to turn, when tan stopped meaning toil and started meaning leisure. But sitting there, you can almost feel it happening. Faint as a tremor. The old world is holding on, but its grip is loosening. You glance around the table. Everyone's faces look faintly blue under the shade, like porcelain dolls. For all the talk of refinement, the effect is eerie. You wonder what the garden must look like from the servant's point of view, a row of pale ghosts hiding from the light, clutching teacups and gossip. It's a funny image. And you stifle a giggle. "What's amusing you?" Meredith asks, raising an eyebrow. "Just imagining how we must look from a distance." You say lightly, "Like lilies afraid to bloom." The words hang there for a moment, too poetic for casual conversation. Then someone changes the subject to French lace imports, and the spell breaks. But you can't stop thinking about it. Lilies afraid to bloom. That's you, isn't it? That's all of you. When the party ends, you wander the garden paths again. The sunlight filters gently through the leaves, dappled and soft. You lower your parasol just enough to feel a faint warmth on your arm. It's nothing dangerous, just a touch. Like an introduction. You stand still, eyes closed, letting it linger for a few seconds longer than you should. It feels good, of course. You wouldn't tell anyone. You'll go back inside soon, wash your face with rose water, and apply the usual powder. But tonight, when you catch your reflection in the mirror, you'll swear your cheeks look a little livelier, a little less ghost-like, and maybe, just maybe, you won't mind. That evening, as twilight settles over the estate, you sit by the window in your room, watching the last traces of sunlight fade into lavender. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, and the world feels wide and ancient. You realize something then: the sun has always been there, patient and unbothered. While humans keep inventing new ways to fear it, you close your eyes and whisper to yourself, perhaps the trick isn't avoiding the sun, it's learning how to meet it halfway. The thought feels too modern, too daring. So you tuck it away like a secret diary entry: tomorrow, you'll go home, back to the city, the carriages, the powders, the veils. But something inside you will have shifted, however slightly. Like a curtain drawn back just enough to let in a sliver of light, you're awake before dawn. The air sharp and grey as you pack your trunk for travel. There's something oddly thrilling about the prospect of movement, of going somewhere. Even if the sun is waiting out there like an ambush. You fold your gowns carefully, layering the lighter day dresses on top, and tuck your parasol into its silk sleeve as though it's a weapon you might need at any moment. The servants are already bustling about, strapping luggage to the carriage roof. Steam hisses from the morning train in the distance, a mechanical sigh. You step out, gloved and veiled, and the mist curls around your boots. The whole world smells of cold, leather, and adventure. Traveling while remaining pale is a kind of art form in this era. Victorian guidebooks even include sections about proper complexion preservation for ladies on the move. You've read one: it recommends vinegar-soaked cloths for the face during long carriage rides and portable veils of fine silk gauze for coastal holidays. You smile faintly. A portable veil, as though modesty could be packed like a picnic. Historians still argue whether women actually followed all these absurd tips or simply liked the idea that they could. But one thing's certain: avoiding the sun took planning, discipline, and a hint of paranoia. As your carriage rolls through the countryside toward the station, you can already feel like trying to pry its way through the curtains. The driver tips his hat as you board, and you settle into a plush seat. Across from you sits a middle-aged woman in traveling attire, light brown, sensible, unadorned. She nods politely. Off to the coast, you answer with a smile. Yes. Hoping for sea air, not sea color. She laughs softly, but her own face bears the faintest tan. A working woman. You think, a governess. Perhaps. Someone who doesn't have the luxury of endless shade. The train lurches forward, rattling over iron tracks. And you watch the world slide by in flickers: green fields, white cottages, flashes of blue sky. The sun is rising fast now, and beams streak through the window. Instinctively, you adjust your bonnet to shield your cheek. It's like being in a duel, light against lace. There's something mesmerizing about the way Victorian travelers choreographed this battle. Ladies' carriages had tinted glass to soften the glare. Folding screens or parasol frames could be clipped inside train compartments. Wealthier families even commissioned special shade carriages for seaside travel. Imagine entire contraptions draped in fabric, rolling along the sand like ghosts refusing to be seen. When you finally arrive at the coast, the air smells of salt, fish, and promise. The sea stretches out before you, dazzling, merciless. You lift a hand to block the glare, and for a moment, it feels like staring at another world. The beach is already dotted with striped tents, bathing machines, as they call them. These wooden cabins on wheels are designed to let women change into cumbersome bathing costumes in private, then be rolled directly into the water without ever exposing a shoulder to sunlight. It's ingenious. In a tragic sort of way. You approach one out of curiosity, running your gloved hand over the painted wood. A cheerful attendant explains how it works, describing how the bathing ladies assist guests into the surf with ropes and belts. It sounds less like recreation and more like a hostage transfer. Still, everyone seems content. You watch from the promenade as women laugh softly in the shallows, veils and all, the water swirling around them like melted silk. The sound of waves blends with the chatter of children and the creak of parasols being adjusted toward or away from the sun. You find a shaded bench under a striped awning and take out your notebook. You write: the sea glitters like scandal. Even the sunlight feels impertinent here. Then you pause, surprised by your own honesty. Behind you, a young couple passes by. The woman, perhaps 20, is bareheaded, her cheeks pink from the morning air. Her companion looks both proud and protective, as though he's escorting someone dangerously modern. You catch fragments of their conversation, something about a new kind of liberty. Historians still debate whether seaside travel democratized sunlight. For centuries, the coast had been a place of healing for the sickly and the rich. But by the late 19th century, railways brought the masses to the water. And with them came a subtle erosion of the old fear of tanning. After all, if everyone's a little pink, who's left to gossip? You stroll down to the pier, where the air tastes of salt and roasted chestnuts. Vendors sell everything from parasols to perfumed vinegar sprays. Children dart between the crowds, their laughter as bright as the sunlight bouncing off the waves. You can't help but smile. For once, the world feels unguarded. A gust of wind lifts your veil. It flutters like a flag of surrender. And suddenly the sun is on your face, warm, bold, undeniable. You freeze, half in horror, half in awe. The sensation is shockingly pleasant. For a heartbeat, you feel alive in a way you can't quite name. Then you tug the veil back down, cheeks flushed for a different reason. A few hours later, aboard the return train, you catch your reflection in the glass. There's a faint glow to your skin, barely noticeable. But you see it. It's the same look you saw on the young woman at the pier, health, not scandal. You wonder what your friends back in the city would say. Probably something dramatic about ruined complexions or vulgar modernity. You chuckle softly. Maybe they're right. Or maybe you've just begun to understand what freedom smells like: salt, sunlight, and a hint of rebellion. As the train rattles homeward, the landscape blurs again. You rest your forehead against the window, watching the fields flicker by. For once, you don't pull the curtain shut. You just let the light fall where it will. Back in the city, the rhythm of your days slips easily into its polished grooves again. Drawing rooms, social calls, and endless small talk about fabrics and fortunes. But something about you has changed. Maybe it's just the way you glance at a window before closing the curtains now, less like a reflex, more like a quiet debate with yourself. At tea one afternoon, a friend named Clara bursts in with her usual whirlwind energy. "You must see what I found at Madame Lucette's shop," she exclaims, setting a tiny glass jar on the table. You lean closer. The label reads Pearl Dust Skin Tonic, imported from Japan. The liquid inside gleams faintly, like moonlight captured in water. Clara lowers her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "They say it's made from crushed pearls. Real ones. You dab it on at night and wake up looking otherworldly." You arch an eyebrow. "And alive, I hope," she laughs, waving her gloved hand. "Oh, come now. Don't be dramatic. It's perfectly safe." Or so the clerk claims. You dip one finger into the tonic and feel the smooth, slippery texture. The scent is faintly floral, almost metallic. There's something alluring about it, though you can't help thinking of the lead creams you abandoned months ago. Beauty in this era is equal parts chemistry and courage. Historians still argue whether imported whiteners like pearl and rice powders truly came from Asia or were simply clever marketing ploys. But one thing is certain: Victorian women adored anything labeled Oriental, a word that promised mystery, sophistication, and, above all, fairness. Shops filled their shelves with Egyptian alabaster creams, Chinese blossom balms, and Indian lotus waters. Half of them were invented in Manchester. The irony is almost poetic. You stroll later through the shopping district, your parasol tucked under one arm. The display windows glitter with jars and bottles, beauty elixirs from around the world. Or so they claim. Each one promises a paler, smoother, purer version of yourself. You imagine the journey of those powders, ground from shells, sifted through muslin, bottled by candlelight, and sold to women who have never seen the ocean or the countries they're named after. There's a strange global web woven through these little jars. A woman in England buys a cream inspired by Japan, a chemist in France copies an Indian formula, a merchant in Hong Kong ships rose water back to London. Beauty, it seems, is an empire of its own. Later, at home, you experiment, just a little. A touch of rice powder on your cheeks. Then a mist of rose water from a delicate atomizer. The scent lingers in the air, soft and ghostly. You study yourself in the mirror. The effect is subtle, but it feels less like armor than art. Perhaps you're learning moderation, enough to enhance, not conceal. You hear laughter outside, the neighborhood children running past in the fading light. Their faces are sunburned and sticky with summer. You remember being that fearless once, before fashion taught you that sunlight is a threat. You wonder what those children will be told when they grow up. The next morning, you meet Clara again at a cafe near Regent Street. She's already halfway through her second cup of chocolate. "Did you try it?" she asks eagerly. "I did," you admit. "It's pleasant. Though I can't say it made me glow like the moon," she grins. "Perhaps you didn't use enough. They say in India, women use sandalwood paste and turmeric. And in China, crushed pearls." You laugh softly. "At this rate, we'll turn our dressing tables into spice cabinets." Still, you're intrigued. You've read travel essays that describe women in other countries embracing sunlight rather than fearing it, bronzed arms, radiant faces. The authors usually sound scandalized, as if witnessing some primitive ritual. But between their lines, you sense admiration. Historians still debate how these global exchanges shaped Western ideals of beauty. Some say the fascination with Eastern whiteners was just colonial vanity. Others argue it sowed the first seeds of cosmetic science, a move from superstition to experimentation. You lean toward the latter. After all, progress often hides inside pretense. At home that evening, you unstopper a new vial, lotus bloom essence. This one from Paris. You dab it on your neck. It tingles faintly, leaving a cool trail. The mirror catches your reflection again. And for the first time, you notice how much of this ritual is about control. In a world that tells women when to cover, when to walk, when to smile, perhaps mixing your own face paste is a tiny rebellion. The city hums outside, horses, bells, laughter. You open the window slightly. A shaft of sunset light spills across your vanity, striking the pearl bottle. It flashes brilliantly, scattering tiny rainbows across the glass. You don't move the bottle out of the sun this time. You just watch, transfixed, as the light dances. Later that week, Clara hosts a cosmetics soiree, where women bring their favorite imported concoctions to sample and gossip over. The table looks like a chemist's stream, tiny jars, brushes, powders, and fans laid out in perfect rows. You lean in to examine one labeled Arabian Sun Veil Powder. The irony makes you snort. Clara catches it. "Don't laugh," she says. "It's supposed to reflect light." You grin. "So, sunscreen?" She shrugs. "I suppose so. Though the instructions just say apply liberally before promenading." You both giggle. Perhaps the idea of blocking sunlight is evolving, not through fear anymore, but through curiosity. By the end of the evening, your fingers are dusted in scents from 3 continents. You feel lightheaded from all the jasmine, camphor, and talk. As you step out into the cool night, you realize how global beauty has become. Behind every jar and powder lies someone else's story, harvested, bottled, and sold for elegance. It's strange to think the Victorian ideal of purity now depends on a world spinning faster, connected by ships and railways, carrying sunlight and shade in equal measure. You walk home under gaslight, your reflection following you in the shop windows, half shadow, half shimmer. For once, you don't mind either half. It begins quietly, the change. not with proclamations or manifestos, but with something as simple as color creeping back into polite cheeks. You first notice it at a charity garden fete in Hyde Park. The air smells of lilacs and roasted almonds. And everywhere you look, there's brightness, dresses in cheerful shades, ribbons fluttering, and, most shockingly, women with faces that look alive. Not chalky, not powdered to oblivion, just softly flushed by the spring sun. You pause by the lemonade stand, half concealed by your parasol, watching them. One woman in particular draws attention, a young suffragist named Eleanor Ashby. She's wearing no veil. Her straw hat tipped back as though she's daring the sky itself. Her laughter rings out, warm and unrestrained. The effect is scandalous and magnetic. Later, over tea, your friend Meredith sniffs. That Ashby girl will regret her liberties when she's blotched by 40. A lady must know the line between confidence and vulgarity. You smile faintly, but something inside you bristles. Maybe it's fatigue, years of hearing the same warnings. Or maybe it's admiration. Because there's something fearless about Eleanor. Something that refuses to wilt. Historians still argue whether the suffrage movement truly influenced fashion or if both were symptoms of the same awakening. Either way, the connection is undeniable. As women began demanding voices, they also began demanding sunlight. A few months later, you see it again. This time on the tennis courts. Sports for women are gaining popularity: croquet, archery, cycling, and with them, a quiet rebellion against layers and lace. You attend a match more out of curiosity than enthusiasm. But as the players move, skirts swishing, arms bared to the elbow, you feel something shift. The rhythm of their bodies. The way they laugh in the sun, it's joy without apology. One of the players, a young journalist named Beatrice Lang, notices your shaded spot by the hedge. Come out of your cave, she calls, grinning. You'll get rickets hiding like that. You laugh despite yourself. I'm preserving my reputation. Beatrice winks. Then consider me gloriously disreputable. Her forearms are freckled. Her smile dazzling. You can't remember the last time you saw anyone look so unapologetically healthy. That night, you write in your diary, they call it vulgar. But I call it vivid. Perhaps pale is not purity, it's absence. There's talk in society pages of new women athletic, sun-touched, independent. The older generation huffs, of course, declaring that civilization will crumble if ladies start looking like their maids. But the tide is turning faster than anyone can scold it away. Postcards begin showing tanned tourists along the Riviera. Magazines praise the healthy outdoor glow. Even physicians, once obsessed with parasols, now preach the benefits of sun cures. You can almost hear the collective gasp of lace collars everywhere. Historians still debate which came first, the fashion for freedom or the freedom to embrace fashion. But it doesn't really matter. Does it? Either way, the old world of dim parlors and ghostly complexions is starting to feel claustrophobic. A few years later, you travel again, this time not to escape, but to explore. The train takes you through fields blazing with summer. You keep your parasol closed on your lap, fingers resting lightly on the handle. The sunlight spilling through the windows no longer feels like an enemy. It's more like a conversation. At your destination, a small seaside town, you find a painter's colony thriving with eccentric energy. The artists are everywhere, sketching, squinting, flirting. The air smells of turpentine and salt. You wander among them, fascinated. Here, tanned skin isn't just tolerated, it's romanticized. Proof of passion, effort, life. One painter, a young man with paint-stained cuffs, glances up from his easel. You'd look marvelous in this light, he says absent-mindedly. As though commenting on the weather. You blush, partly from embarrassment, partly from the warmth on your cheeks. Wouldn't that ruin the illusion of refinement? You ask. He laughs. Refinement's overrated. Light reveals more truth than lace ever could. It's the kind of line you'll pretend to mock later. But secretly, it burrows deep. By evening, the beach glows orange and gold. Women stroll bareheaded, their gowns lighter, simpler. You sit among them, your shoes buried in warm sand. The waves lap at your skirt hem, teasingly close. The moment feels suspended, half past history, half before modernity. You remember your first lesson about sunlight, that it darkens, damages, diminishes. And yet here you are, surrounded by women who've turned that fear into something luminous. A soft laugh escapes you. We used to call this ruin, you murmur. And now it's fashion. The truth is, the rebellion isn't just about dance, it's about visibility. For centuries, pale skin was a sign of staying hidden. Now, women want to be seen, to exist in the same light that men have always claimed for themselves. You linger until the sun sinks low, the air cool and blue, the sea swallows the last of the light. And for a moment, it feels symbolic, the end of one age, the quiet dawn of another. Historians still argue over what exactly killed the cult of power: women's rights, sports, travel, or sheer boredom with rules. But you suspect it was something simpler, the universal longing to feel warmth without shame. You pack your parasol carefully that night, more out of nostalgia than necessity. Its silk canopy feels like an artifact from another version of you, someone who believed sunlight was a threat instead of a gift. As you close your trunk, you glance once more at your reflection. Your cheeks are kissed by the faintest bronze, your eyes brighter. You smile. Somewhere, a younger version of yourself is gasping in disapproval. But this one? She's breathing easier. You return to London with the scent of sea salt still clinging to your clothes. And suddenly the city feels dimmer than you remembered. The gaslights hiss, the soot hangs thick, the sky seems permanently grey. You realize how much you've changed when even the soft daylight leaking through your curtains feels too faint. The first thing you notice in the papers is an advertisement, small, tucked between columns of corset sales and patent elixirs. New scientific skin protector, for gentlemen and ladies engaging in sports or travel. Beneath, in tiny print, contains zinc oxide, petroleum jelly, and light-absorbing compounds. You blink. Protector. Not whitener. Not bleach or veil or disguise. Just protection. Historians still debate which chemist first stumbled on the concept of modern sunscreen. Some credit Austrian scientists in the 1880s experimenting with sun filters, others point to Parisian pharmacists tinkering with petroleum bases. A few even whisper about eccentric inventors selling strange ointments to explorers headed for Africa or Australia. Whatever the truth, you can sense the shift. The language of fear is being replaced by the language of science. At afternoon tea, Clara reads the same advertisement and frowns. Honestly, why would anyone want to go out in the sun enough to need that? You grin over your cup. Perhaps because they've learned there's a world outside the drawing room. She rolls her eyes. But there's affection there. You've both come far, from lead creams to pearl dust. And now to zinc and chemistry. You wonder what will come next. That evening, you attend a lecture at the Royal Institution, something your younger self would have considered scandalously dull. The speaker, a bespectacled physician with a nervous cough, presents his findings on the photochemical effects of solar radiation. The phrase sounds grand, but as he describes experiments using glass lenses, oils, and powdered metals, you realize what he's truly describing: an early sunscreen. He holds up a small tin, its surface gleaming in the lamplight. This mixture, he explains, when applied to the skin, appears to reflect harmful rays. The audience titters skeptically. You, however, are enthralled. He's talking about sunlight not as sin or fashion, but as a measurable force, something to be studied, understood, balanced. It feels like magic wrapped in logic. Later, outside the hall, a drizzle begins to fall. The street lamps shimmer in puddles. And you can almost hear the city breathing, a mechanical rhythm of carriages, boots, and rain. You pull your shawl closer. But your thoughts are still spinning. If sunlight can be filtered instead of feared, what else might be possible? Historians still argue whether Victorian science was driven by curiosity or control. In this case, maybe both. The same culture that once demanded veils is now inventing lotions to make veils obsolete. It's progress with a wink. You try the skin protector yourself weeks later, purchasing a small tin from a discreet chemist's shop near Piccadilly. The clerk slides it across the counter as if it's contraband. Imported from Germany. He whispers. A bit dear. But they say it truly works, at home. You open it. The scent is faintly metallic. The texture thick and waxy. You smooth a small amount over your wrist, half expecting it to sting like vinegar or bleach. Instead, it feels soothing, even comforting. The surface gleams slightly, like polished ivory. But alive. You step into the garden, holding your arm to the light. The sun is mild. The warmth gentle. You stand still, waiting. Nothing burns. Nothing prickles. It's almost anticlimactic. But beneath that calm is a quiet revolution. You're meeting the sun as an equal, not an adversary. A sparrow flits across the path. And you smile. Maybe it's all in your head. But you swear the air smells different, less like danger, more like possibility. A few days later, during a visit to a friend's estate, you mention your discovery. The ladies gather around as you describe the lotion, their fans half raised in fascination. So it lets you walk in sunlight? One asks incredulously. Without freckles, in theory? You say. Though perhaps freckles are simply the skin's way of remembering joy, they laugh. Though not mockingly. For once, curiosity outweighs disdain. Word spreads. Before long, chemists across London are advertising protective salves and solar creams. Some are genuine attempts at innovation, others are snake oil in prettier jars. But the idea has taken root. Shade no longer rules supreme, balance does. You start noticing little things everywhere, ladies letting their gloves slip off at picnics, gentlemen rolling up their sleeves, children splashing without hats. Even in portraits, painters begin to favor warmth over pallor. Artists chase sunlight the way poets chase inspiration. Still, the transition isn't without resistance. Old habits die hard, especially when they've been lacquered with morality. One afternoon, your aunt clucks her tongue at your bare arms. You'll look like a field hand by September. She warns. You smile sweetly. Then I shall be the most fashionable field hand in London. The joke lingers between you. Gentle but defiant. Historians still debate whether Victorian women embraced these early sunscreens out of liberation or convenience. Perhaps both. What matters is that fear is slowly being replaced by choice, and choice, in any form, is a quiet kind of freedom. As summer deepens, you travel once more. This time without your heavy parasol. The train windows are wide open, and the light floods in. You apply a thin layer of the strange, silvery lotion to your cheeks and forearms. The breeze smells of iron and grass. You watch your reflection in the glass. The woman looking back isn't the same one who hid behind lace and lead. Her skin isn't flawless, it's human. But her gaze is steady. Her posture unburdened. For the first time, you feel as though you belong in the daylight. The world outside seems brighter than ever, not just because of the sun, but because you've stopped running from it. By now, the world has shifted under your feet, and you can sense the century drawing to its close like a curtain ready to fall. The air feels charged with invention, bicycles on the streets, telephones in parlors, even whispers of flying machines. And somewhere amid it all, a curious new idea begins to glow in the background, that the sun, once an enemy, might just be a friend in disguise. You wake one morning to an unfamiliar sensation, a ray of sunlight warming your face through the lace curtains. You don't flinch. You simply lie there, eyes half open, letting it touch you. The feeling is gentle, almost intimate. You remember when the same warmth would have sent you scrambling for your parasol, dabbing at your skin in panic. Now it feels like a homecoming. Downstairs, the newspaper is full of chatter about the coming new century. 1900 looming like a promise. Advertisements for modern living line every page, bicycles, canned goods, electric irons. But nestled among them is another ad that catches your eye, health through sunlight, the new philosophy of vitalism. Historians still argue whether vitalism was science or spectacle. Some saw it as a genuine step toward understanding human biology, others dismissed it as yet another fad. But for you, it feels like the final turn in a long, winding road. The same culture that once covered every inch of skin is now preaching the gospel of open air and sunshine. You think of Dr. Rollier in Switzerland, opening his mountain sanatoriums for heliotherapy, sunlight as medicine. You think of pale, convalescent children carried onto balconies, their blankets thrown back so the sun could kiss their faces. It's a reversal so complete. It borders on poetic, and you realize something. The story of Victorian women avoiding sunburn was never just about vanity. It was about control, of image, of reputation, of body. The great irony is that the moment science gave women the tools to protect themselves safely, it also handed them permission to live more freely. At an afternoon picnic that summer, you see it for yourself. The park hums with laughter and color. Girls in lighter dresses chase each other across the grass. A few even remove their gloves entirely. Scandalous in earlier decades. You catch sight of a young woman reclining under a tree, reading the Strand magazine. Her hat lies beside her, the sun spilling over her hair. She glances up and smiles, not with defiance, but with ease. Isn't it too bright? You ask. Half teasing, she shrugs. Maybe. But it feels honest, honest. The word lands softly. Because that's what this transformation truly is, a slow return to honesty with nature, with skin, with self. Later, as the day wanes, you walk home beneath a sky streaked with gold. The air smells of warm grass and coal smoke, a strange but familiar mix. The parasol you once carried religiously now sits folded under your arm. More ornament than shield, a memory surfaces of the first time you mixed that lead cream. Trembling at your mother's vanity table, praying not to spill. You remember the sting, the chalky residue, the way it felt to pretend paleness was perfection. You almost laugh aloud at the absurdity. The city clock chimes 7. Carriages roll past, their wheels splashing through puddles from a brief shower. You pause at a shop window filled with cosmetics, powders, perfumes, and a new display marked sun protection preparations for the modern lady. The jars are prettier now, the labels crisp, but you can still trace the lineage of all the past experiments. Each one, in its own way, was a stepping stone to this moment. Historians still debate who deserves credit, the chemists, the feminists, the doctors, or the dreamers. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between them all. Back home, you light a lamp and sit at your writing desk. The glow of the flame feels almost redundant beside the faint warmth lingering on your skin. You dip your pen, hesitate, then begin to write, not about vanity or fashion, but about freedom. About standing in sunlight without apology. About choosing to be seen, and for the first time, your words flow easily. You imagine the next generation, girls born into a world where parasols are accessories, not armor. Where freckles are charming, not shameful. Where the sun is something to share, not to fear. Maybe someday, centuries from now, someone will smear on a dab of invisible cream before heading to the beach, never realizing they're carrying the legacy of every cautious Victorian who learned to step into the light. You smile at the thought. Outside, the city exhales, the soft hiss of gas lamps, the distant clatter of hooves. A breeze slips through the window, ruffling the papers on your desk. You close your eyes, listening. The night is cool. but not cold. For once, you're perfectly content in your own skin. The world quiets around you now. The bustle of Victorian streets fades into a soft hum. And you find yourself drifting somewhere between lamp glow and moonlight. The journey you've taken, through powders, parasols, and peculiar ointments, lingers like the aftertaste of old perfume. Faint but unforgettable, you picture the countless women who once tiptoed through their days beneath heavy veils, guarding against a single sunbeam. Then you see them setting those veils aside, one by one, discovering that the world doesn't end when light touches them, it begins. Your breathing slows. Each inhale carries the ghost of rose water and chalk. Each exhale the scent of sea breeze and freedom. The lesson is gentle but certain. Sometimes the world's harshest rules dissolve not with rebellion, but with quiet evolution. The next time sunlight brushes your face, maybe you'll think of those long ago ladies, of their ingenuity, their contradictions, their stubborn grace. Maybe you'll smile, knowing that every shade of skin, from porcelain to bronze, has its own kind of beauty. The lamps dim further. The air grows still. You feel the soft edges of sleep drawing closer, wrapping around you like silk. You've followed this story from shadow into sunlight. And now it's time to rest, so close your eyes. Let the last whisper of the Victorian age fade to quiet. The sun will rise again soon, but for now, it waits for you to dream.